नमस्कार, आप देख रहे हैं आपका बाजार। मैं हूं साक्षी बत्रा।
नमस्कार, मैं हूं दीपाली राणा। आपकी सभी क्वेरीज को हम शामिल करेंगे शो में, लेकिन यहाँ से सीधे रुख कर लेते हैं स्टेट बैंक ऑफ इंडिया के बैंकिंग कॉन्क्लेव का।
I always use the example of electronic sector. Why do we as a country import electronics worth $40 billion a year? Can we not make them in India, just for India? And if we do that, not only are we going to save the foreign exchange outgo and so on, but it's estimated, our people have estimated that just this sector can actually create an employment of 28 million people over a 10-year period. So I think we have to specifically look for those sectors. At the same time, to your question, can technology play a role? I think technology has to continue to play the role because technology enables many other things. It enables accuracy, it enables efficiency. So even when we talk of robotics, what we say is that as a person is doing the job, the mundane part of both, making and checking, the checking gets done and things are 100% accurate, then your speed of service, etc. goes up. But that does not mean that the bank does not grow. That does not mean that the bank does not actually add a few thousand people almost every year to its employment base. So I think we have to create employment, but we have to make people whose skills are relevant to the kind of employments we create, and we have to identify those sectors that can really fire up the employment base in the country.
Okay, so basically you are talking about looking at developing particular sectors, and of course you do believe that technology will not necessarily take away jobs, may actually end up creating many more. Well, going on from that, Mr. Birla, if I can ask you the next question, and that is, you are currently employing about 1.2 lakh employees worldwide. And that being the case, what do you believe you can do more in order to create these further jobs? Do you believe that the numbers that you already have is already too many and that you should be looking at further efficiencies there? Or do you really think that, this 100 crores of employable people that we will have by 2050, that they can actually be accommodated in this country by doing certain things right, and those things should be started from now? So what could be those things?
So just to reiterate some of the points that Chanda made, I think that our demographic dividend or the demographic advantage that we have is pretty much a potential dividend for us, not just a dividend, but a huge dividend when we look at the fact that other economies around the world, especially the developed economies, are fast aging. We have a median age of about 27. I believe for China it is about 35. We have a working population of 63% of the total population of our country, which is huge. The dependency ratio, which is the number of people who are not working or who are working vis-a-vis or on the base of the total population, is getting lower year by year. All of these things mean that we're going to have more young people below the age of 25 in the next few years in the working force as compared to anywhere else in the world. And young people means energy, new ideas, it means innovation. All of that means that we will have more people earning income, we'll have more income, we will have more consumption, therefore we will have more of savings. As the country grows, as you have more people earning, the rate of savings in the countries goes up. And I think the broad themes that this brings to the fore are those of manufacturing, the first one and the foremost one. If you look at statistics, manufacturing actually is the biggest lever for employment opportunities, for creating employment opportunities, which means that for every rupee spent, if you look at the employment opportunities that become available, that's the highest for investment in the manufacturing space. For every manufacturing job that you create 4 jobs in the service sector. All of these jobs are normally high-quality jobs. All of these jobs are normally high-paying jobs. So these are the kind of jobs that we are looking at. manufacturing needs an impetus. I believe that we have the potential to become a manufacturing hub, not just for this part of the world, but for the entire country, for the entire world. We have a track record in manufacturing. Some of the manufacturing companies in India, including ours, are world beaters in their spaces globally. Some MNCs, many MNCs have had a track record of manufacturing here in India, and very successfully so, and are looking at increasing their investments in manufacturing facilities here in India. So I believe manufacturing is a huge lever for creating potential jobs. With manufacturing comes the whole issue of ease of doing business. That is something that this government is focusing hugely on. I think this whole idea of ranking states on the basis of ease of doing business in each state is a great idea. I can see that it's creating a very healthy spirit of competition amongst the states, given the fact that we have a presence in almost every state of the country. I believe that states are actually now going out and competing for that extra rupee of investment, whether from domestic investors or from investors globally. The other interesting factoid is that we have 57% of our population working in rural India, which contributes only 17% to our GDP, which means that there is huge disguised unemployment in rural India. And the fact is that we will see huge urbanization happening in the coming decade. And the challenge, therefore, will be around infrastructure, will be around quality of housing, quality of healthcare. So I think these are the big themes: urbanization, education, formal education, but also vocational training, which this government is focusing on, as well as quality of infrastructure. I think that these are the big levers that we need to pull as a country, and we've got to actually fire on all cylinders to achieve the kind of increase in the number of jobs that we're looking at to actually reap the demographic dividend.
You know, I find that comment of yours regarding states very interesting. And I remember, you know, before the election, this last election that we had, that's about 3 years back, I had attended a talk by Mr. Ramchandra Guha, who's a noted historian, as you know. And he was asked, you know, who will form the better government, the UPA or the NDA? And he gave an answer which has stuck in my mind. He said that actually speaking, India will come into its own only when we have 7 or 8 very good chief ministers, and not only a prime minister. So he actually attributed the growth of India to having better ruled states than to only have a very well-ruled center. So I think what you were saying about this competitiveness between states, really, it is something that we should look forward to, and we are beginning to see it. You're quite right there. We are beginning to see a lot of competition among states. Mr. Mahindra, if I can just ask you the next question. You know, India has lots of low-skilled workers, and their share in the workforce has remained more or less constant, around 30% of the workforce. What's been getting squeezed are the medium-skill occupations, actually, who are engaged in things like operating machineries, driving vehicles, doing clerical work, and things like that. In fact, for instance, when you come to clerical work, I think this is a breed that is going out of fashion totally. If you look at the private sector banks, they don't have any clerical staff at all. So what could be the possible reasons for this? And is it possible for the low skill to directly leapfrog to the high skill? Do you have to go through the transition of having a lot of medium skilled workers? Is it necessary to promote these for the Make in India piece? And if so, how can we go about doing it?
I'm not sure I'm going to have the panacea for all those knotty problems, Arundhati, but I want to echo something that Kumar had said about the importance of manufacturing. I remember when Bill Gates came to India in '97, and I was at some CII function where naturally he was being projected as a demigod, and all the preambles to his address talked about how India was going to leapfrog the manufacturing era and go straight into the services era. And he added a very sobering note. And particularly because in that year, I think only 2 million people were being employed by IT. And he said, you know, you cannot leapfrog the manufacturing sector. And he pointed to China and he said, the kind of population you have, you're going to have to focus on manufacturing. That's the only area that will get you those jobs. Which, of course, poured cold water on that audience right away. But his words have, I think, turned out to be true, and hence the Make in India push. Coming to your question about skills, can the low-end leapfrog? I'm not sure it can be done, to be very honest. I think we do have to focus on finding some way to unsqueeze that middle segment, and that is going to be manufacturing. Now, at this point in time, the skeptics out there are saying that when China got into its manufacturing boom from the late 80s, the world was growing at a rapid pace. The world was ready to receive Chinese goods. The situation today is different. The world is actually closing in. The world is becoming more protectionist. So we don't face the same propitious circumstances that the Chinese did when they had their boom. That's one major problem. And the second question that I'm always faced when I travel is that you're talking about Make in India, but making itself is undergoing a revolution. With 3D printing and other technologies, proximate manufacturing is coming back into vogue. How do you therefore bring this boom in? There are two answers to this, very briefly. One, I think what the government is doing is spot on in terms of the Make in India efforts to improve the ease of business. And we're meeting, as you said, or somebody had pointed out, I think Mr. Mundra had pointed out, that we have fortunately climbed the ranks in the listing of countries in terms of ease of doing business. And from what I had last heard from Niti Aayog, they have some kind of plot afoot to create some giant special economic zones, coastal economic zones. Dr. Pangadia is very focused on coastal economic zones, particularly because he believes that, look, infrastructure is going to take a while. So if we do want special economic zones that are going to export, they should be on either side so that there is no bottlenecks they face in getting their goods out. And these are going to be giant zones. Will they succeed? I believe so. And it's ironic coming from an Indian businessman who should be looking at opportunities to be there. But to be very frank, as a policymaker, I would simply go to all the overseas companies, including China, and the Chinese companies themselves that are in Shenzhen and Guangdong, and are worrying about the lowering of competitiveness of Chinese labor and say, come out here. Because very frankly, they already have the clients. It's like Foxconn coming to India. Foxconn comes with Apple. So I'm sure that there will be Indian companies that will fight for their bit of the pie. But I think given the demographic disaster that awaits us, as opposed to the dividend, if we don't act quickly, I believe what the government and Niti Aayog is plotting to do is absolutely right. Addressing the other question about proximate manufacturing, I think we need to think a little bifocally. Even as we try and go after a fair share of scale manufacturing by getting some companies stealing share from China, moving them to these new zones, I think we have to think of the concept of smart villages, not just smart cities. Why shouldn't India be a part of this new technology boom? Why shouldn't we lead the 3D printing technology boom? Costs are coming down. One of the exercises we are doing as a pilot, really as CSR right now, but it could become different, is to simply find a village and put a 3D printer and scanner out there. Somewhat akin to that hole-in-the-wall experiment that somebody did with a computer in a wall in a slum. But what we want to do is put it out there without any preconceived notions of what will happen, see what the artisans do with it. If you think of the craftsmanship that is available in rural India and their design skills, and you give them the means to produce in a high technology manner, they don't even need today, they don't even need a marketing organization. You can go straight onto the net and serve your goods to the globe. from an automotive company, think about having your parts, certain parts, automotive parts printed in the village. Think of what it does to inventory, rather than having warehousing needs. But you have local people able to replicate certain fast-moving parts through 3D printing. So you take the employment to the village. So I'll stop there because I do think there is a way to avoid the demographic disaster. But it involves not only scale manufacturing, it involves proximate manufacturing and taking manufacturing to the villages.
Well,
तो एसबीआई के बैंकिंग और इकोनॉमिक कॉन्क्लेव में आप दिग्गजों को सुन रहे थे। आनंद महिंद्रा, कुमार मंगलम बिरला, चंदा कोचर और किशोर बयानी इस कॉन्क्लेव में शामिल हैं, और जिसमें उन्होंने जॉब क्रिएशन और एम्प्लॉयमेंट अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ और साथ ही साथ इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ के लिहाज से अपने व्यूज़ शेयर किए।